The Scarecrow of Oz. This is a Librivox recording. All Librivox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit librivox.org. Chapter 21, narrated by Riccardo. Dorothy, Betsy, and Ozma. I suppose many of my readers have read descriptions of the beautiful and magnificent Emerald City of Oz, so I need not describe it here, except to state that never has any city in any fairyland ever equalled this one in stately splendor. It lies almost exactly in the center of the land of Oz, and in the center of the Emerald City rises the wall of glistening emeralds that surrounds the palace of Ozma. The palace is almost a city in itself, and is inhabited by many of the ruler's especial friends, and those who have won her confidence and favor. As for Ozma herself, there are no words in any dictionary I can find that are fitted to describe this young girl's beauty of mind and person. Merely to see her is to love her for her charming face and manners. To know her is to love her for her tender sympathy, her generous nature, her truth and honour. Born of a long line of fairy queens, Ozma is as nearly perfect as any fairy may be, and she is noted for her wisdom as well as for her other qualities. Her happy subjects adore their girl ruler, and each one considers her a comrade and protector. At the time of which I write, Ozma's best friend and most constant companion was a little Kansas girl named Dorothy, a mortal who had come to the land of Oz in a very curious manner, and had been offered a home in Ozma's palace. Furthermore, Dorothy had been made a princess of Oz, and was as much at home in the royal palace as was the gentle ruler. She knew almost every part of the great country, and almost all of its numerous inhabitants. Next to Ozma, she was loved better than anyone in all Oz, for Dorothy was simple and sweet, seldom became angry, and had such a friendly, charming way that she made friends wherever she wandered. It was she who first brought the Scarecrow and the Tin Woodman and the Cowardly Lion to the Emerald City. Dorothy had also introduced to Ozma the Shaggy Man and the Hungry Tiger, as well as Billina the Yellow Hen, Eureka the Pink Kitten, and many other delightful characters and creatures. Coming as she did from our world, Dorothy was much like many other girls we know, so there were times when she was not so wise as she might have been, and other times when she was obstinate and got herself into trouble. But life, in a fairyland, had taught the little girl to accept all sorts of surprising things as matters of course, for, while Dorothy was no fairy, but just as mortal as we are, she had seen more wonders than most mortals ever do. Another little girl from our outside world also lived in Ozma's palace. This was Betsy Bobbin, whose strange adventures had brought her to the Emerald City, where Ozma had cordially welcomed her. Betsy was a shy little thing, and could never get used to the marvels that surrounded her, but she and Dorothy were firm friends, and thought themselves very fortunate in being together in this delightful country. One day, Dorothy and Betsy were visiting Ozma in the girl ruler's private apartment, and among the things that especially interested them was Ozma's magic picture, set in a handsome frame and hung upon the wall of the room. This picture was a magic one, because it constantly changed its scenes and showed events and adventures happening in all parts of the world. Thus it was really a moving picture of life, and if the one who stood before it wished to know what any absent person was doing, the picture instantly showed that person with his or her surroundings. The two girls were not wishing to see anyone in particular on this occasion, but merely enjoyed watching the shifting scenes, some of which were exceedingly curious and remarkable. Suddenly Dorothy exclaimed,
"Why, there's Button-Bright!"
and this drew Ozma also to look at the picture, for she and Dorothy knew the boy well.
"Who is Button-Bright?"
asked Betsy, who had never met him.
"Why, he's the little boy who is just getting off the back of that strange flying creature,"
exclaimed Dorothy. Then she turned to Ozma and asked,
"What is that thing, Ozma? A bird? I've never seen anything like it before."
"It is an auk,"
answered Ozma, for they were watching the scene where the Orc and the three big birds were first landing their passengers in Jinxland after the long flight across the desert.
I wonder,
Added the girl ruler musingly,
why those strangers dare venture into that unfortunate country, which is ruled by a wicked king.
That girl and the one-legged man seem to be mortals from the outside world,
said Dorothy.
The man isn't one-legged.
Corrected Betsy,
He has one wooden leg.
It's almost as bad.
declared Dorothy, watching Captain Bill stamp around.
They are 3 mortal adventurers,
Said Ozma.
and they seem worthy and honest. But I fear they will be treated badly in Jinxland, and if they meet with any misfortune there, it will reflect badly upon me, for Jinxland is a part of my dominions.
Can't we help them in any way?
Inquired Dorothy.
That seems like a nice little girl. I'd be sorry if anything happened to her.
Let us watch the picture for a while.
Suggested Ozma, and so they all drew chairs before the magic picture and followed the adventures of Trot and Captain Bill and Button Bright. Presently the scene shifted and showed their friend the Scarecrow crossing the mountains into Jinxland, and that somewhat relieved Ozma's anxiety, for she knew at once that Glinda the Good had sent the Scarecrow to protect the strangers. The adventures in Jinxland proved very interesting to the 3 girls in Ozma's palace, who during the succeeding days spent much of their time in watching the picture. It was like a story to them.
That girl's a regular trump,
Exclaimed Dorothy, referring to Trot, and Ozma answered,
She's a dear little thing, and I am sure nothing very bad will happen to her. The old sailor is a fine character too, for he has never once grumbled over being a grasshopper, as so many would have done.
When the Scarecrow was so nearly burned up, the girls all shivered a little, and they clapped their hands in joy when the flock of Orcs came and saved him. So it was that when all the exciting adventures in Jinxland were over, and the 4 Orcs had begun their flights across the mountains to carry the mortals into the land of Oz, Ozma called the wizard to her and asked him to prepare a place for the strangers to sleep. The famous Wizard of Oz was a quaint little man who inhabited the royal palace and attended to all the magical things that Ozma wanted done. He was not as powerful as Glinda, to be sure, but he could do a great many wonderful things. He proved this by placing a house in the uninhabited part of the Quadling country, where the Orcs landed Captain Bill and Trot and Button Bright, and fitting it with all the comforts I have described in the last chapter. Next morning Dorothy said to Ozma,
Oughtn't we go to meet the strangers so we can show them the way to the Emerald City? I'm sure that little girl will feel shy in this beautiful land, and I know if 'twas me I'd like somebody to give me a welcome.
Ozma smiled at her little friend and answered,
You and Betsy may go to meet them, if you wish, but I cannot leave my palace just now, as I am to have a conference with Jack Pumpkinhead and Professor Wogglebug on important matters. You may take the Sawhorse and the Red Wagon, and if you start soon you will be able to meet the Scarecrow and the strangers at Glinda's palace.
Oh, thank you!
cried Dorothy, and went away to tell Betsy and to make preparations for the journey. End of chapter 21.